before me. No one ever. We made it! Woo! The first! What a first! Woo!
Major, we've lost the Indian. He's run off.
He got us here.
Would you please sit down now and stop screaming at our guests? Thank you. Would you please sit down? We would like to start. Thank you very much. Thank you. Please sit down. Thank you very much. Welcome to the Berlinale special and welcome to the press conference of the lost city of Z. And I'm going to introduce our guests. I'm starting from the left. Please welcome, for the third time in Berlin at the Berlinale, Robert Pattinson. Wonderful to have you here. The wonderful actress who played Nina, Sienna Miller. Welcome. And Percy Fawcett himself, Charlie Hunnam. Great to have you here. And the director and screenwriter, James Gray. Welcome. And there was the first question there in the first row. I can't. Yeah, over there in the first row. Yeah, she's waving. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Alessandra Tomasi from Italy, F Magazine. I would like to ask to Mr. Anna and to Mr. Pattinson, do you recognize yourself in the brave and adventurous spirit of your characters? And what's the biggest adventure you ever been on as a human being? Thank you.
I recognize myself as brave and adventurous every day. I mean, this film was a pretty big adventure. We found ourselves in Colombia in the jungle, in a place north of Santa Marta on the borders between Colombia and Venezuela. It's pretty adventurous. There were all manner of things on any given day that thought it might be a nice idea to bite and attempt to kill us. James actually was minding his own business in the monitor tent one day, and there was a fairly beautiful, large, pinkish cream spider. And it was just a very, very thin piece of gauze, this tent. And James was leaning back on it, and the spider was climbing up his back. And I think the snake wrangler or somebody that knew that terrain saw this and panicked and swatted it away. And apparently if it had bitten James, he would have been dead in about 30 seconds. Do you remember that? It was a fun day.
I'm very disturbed because I never heard that story before.
We maybe thought it was best not to alert you
quite
at
clearly.
the time.
I did have a scorpion on my leg. I didn't know about a pink spider. That's great.
I had a scorpion on my hand, too.
Oh, yes, that remember? I remember.
Those were the days.
Yes.
That's the next.
Robert? I haven't done the interviews yet. I'm not warmed up.
Robert's very adventurous too.
Yeah, I guess very adventurous. I don't know. I mean, I guess it does appeal to me doing jobs like this. I mean, when you don't get that many opportunities in everyday life to just disappear into the jungle. And I do actively seek out jobs that involve doing slightly adventurous things. But what's the biggest adventure I've ever been on? God, I don't know. I really don't. Six Flags, yeah. Six Flags is pretty scary. God, I don't know. I'm sorry. Terrible answer.
We're going to come back later to that question and maybe take the next one.
Yeah. Question from Brazil. James, this is the best film from the Berlinale. Thank you very much for such a wonderful piece. Could you tell us two things? I would like you to say a few words about your work with Darius Conde, the cinematographer, and if you could say something about the scenes concerning the First World War, that they are absolutely amazing.
The cinematographer and I, Darius Conde and I, this was our second movie together. We have a very good rapport. He drives me absolutely crazy, and I drive him crazy, and we fight every day, and it's wonderful. You know, he's a real artist. You know, he's the best thing about him is that he talks back to me. You know, if I say, let's go, let's shoot, and he says, no, you have to worry, the light is not exactly right, you know, you can't shoot yet. And we don't shoot. So at the moment you get frustrated, and then all of a sudden you see the footage and the stills. We weren't watching footage, actually. I was getting digital stills back because of the way the film was shot. And you forgive all. He has the real artist's eye. And we communicate really through painters. I showed him a lot of Rousseau and Claude Lorraine and Corot and other artists like that, and really not through other movies. And because he has that sensitivity. About the First World War, I thought it was essential, story-wise, an essential bit, because I thought it would give the lie, or really give full color to the lie that is the idea of the advanced European civilization. It's in the book. I didn't obviously make it up. He was blinded by chlorine gas. And I thought it was a great opportunity to expose that the film is really about two different planets almost, and one thinking of itself as superior, and show that the war, I think, gave it a context that hopefully moves the film beyond, like, you know, white man goes to jungle movie, that it had a bigger scope than that. So we had a definite dedication to getting it right, and it was, I think it was as bad, at least for me, I don't know how you guys felt, but in the shooting, I had as tough a time there as I did in Amazonia, because, you know, being arrogant, I said I want the trenches to be the exact, you know, all this crap, and you get there and you realize, wait a minute, what did you do? And they say, well, we did exactly what you asked. This is exactly the width of a real trench. That's exactly the width of the real battlefield. And you say it's too close. The enemies are too close to each other. And the trench is too narrow. Well, Mr. Gray, that's what you asked for. And you sit there and you say to yourself, wow, I'm an idiot, because Stanley Kubrick did it better than you. And he had wide trenches and a faraway battlefield. And he was smarter than you, and he knew what to do. So, and I was sitting there in the mud and, you know, all that stuff. So I had a tough time of it. But, you know, hopefully it's accurate, you know.
Thank you.
I don't get out enough.
Just a minute. Yep.
The question is for Charlie. Since Sons of Anarchy, it seems like you've taken your time to carefully choose your next projects. Did you need a bit of time to distance yourself from a character you played for so long? And what was it about this character that made you want to play this?
Initially, the draw was to work with James, but then once I read the script, I just became very interested in the themes of the film, particularly the sort of central conflict that Percy feels, which is this dedication to his bringing forth this intention for his own life and doing what he felt compelled to do, sort of fulfill his personal sense of destiny, and the inevitable conflict that creates in honoring the other responsibilities in life, namely with Percy family and his economic responsibility. And that was something that I had, at that time in my life, after doing Sons of Anarchy for so long and doing a film in between every season, felt like I had been very, very selfish in neglecting my personal life and in my pursuit of my own sense of personal destiny. So that was something that I've been sort of grappling with and been interested in trying to reconcile in my own life for a while. And it was clearly something that James was interested in exploring. So that immediately created a connection for me with this guy. I felt like I could relate to and bring a richness to that central conflict in the character. And then just generally, I mean, I was hungry for an opportunity both with substance of material and quality of director to move forward in my career and do something, the level of work that I'd always been aspiring to do but hadn't quite achieved yet in my career. So this felt like the opportunity in a lot of ways that I'd been waiting my whole life for.
Thank you.
So thank you, James.
Thank you.
There's one on the left.
Hello, Sarah from Reuters. Question for James. This is one of quite a lot of true life stories that we're seeing at the Berlin Film Festival, and I wondered what appealed to you about making that and what it is about Percy's story that perhaps is relevant today as well as back then.
I can't obviously speak to one of the great misfortunes of having a film in a festival is that you have all these people coming up to you and telling you how good other movies are, and you don't get to see any of them, and they say, oh, have you seen such and such, it's amazing. So the fact that there are a number of other true stories I'm totally blind to, because, you know, I was on Air Berlin, you know, eating food like Spätzle an hour ago or whatever, so I have no idea what's going on. But in this case, a true story, it's not really a factor for me whether it's a true story or not. I know it's a draw for many people. What is interesting to me is if I connect with the character. And when I read the book, when I was sent the book, what interested me was a person who felt inadequate, and the power of class to determine his worldview and his desires, the power of class to shape him and what he wanted and what he felt like he didn't have. And that was a very powerful idea to me. So that was really the reason I pursued it. The movie, unfortunately, is, I think, as relevant as ever, because we cannot close the book on what is clearly a white, let's be honest here, a white and very racist colonialist view of the world, and unfortunately it still needs exposure. So I wish I could say, you know, that we don't have this wave of nationalism that's gripping the world now, but we do, and more than ever I think we need to be reminded that we're all made of the same clay. So the unfortunate truth is I think it's very relevant, and I wish it weren't.
I have a question for Sienna. Your character Nina is such a liberated and brave woman for her times especially, and I bet if it was playing in modern times she would have gone with him, but now she has to stay home and she loses him. Do you pity her? What do you think about her character?
I think it was a really honest portrayal of what it was like for women then, and I think what I loved about Nina was that she was so modern, and he really celebrated that in her. They were Buddhists. She was a suffragette. She was raising children, but I don't think she ever sort of felt sorry for herself. She feels very strong and very contemporary and very liberated, but battling against the confines of a very oppressive society, which is something that's thankfully changed and is continuing to change. But I loved her.
There was somebody waving there. Wait for the microphone.
Another question to Mr. Pattinson. We have seen this character that put themselves in physical risks, and they are driven by intellectual curiosity and self-sacrifice spirit. How can you relate to this, and would you easily survive in this kind of wild environment?
Sorry, can you say the question one more time?
Sure. We see the character that put themselves in risk, physically speaking, and then they have self-sacrifice spirit and also intellectual curiosity. How can you relate to the aspect of the character, and will you easily survive in this wild, naturalistic environment?
I mean, I guess I do have an intellectual curiosity in different characters I want to kind of try and empathize with. I guess I relate on that level, and also just in general reality, not just in my work. I kind of have that with my life as well. I just kind of I don't really like to judge people that much. How would I survive in that environment? I don't know. I mean, when I first read the script, I loved the idea of there being aspects of areas of the world that you could still explore and were totally uncontrolled. I mean, there are now, but I think something about everybody being so much more connected, it kind of takes away that mystery and kind of majesty of going into the unknown. I think I kind of tell myself I would kind of prefer that, but really I would probably want to have my Twitter. Yeah, I can relate on that level, I think.
Thank you. There's one on the left.
James, Brazil again. I got impressed in the film in the respectful way Percy Fawcett treats the Indian people. I would like you to tell a few words about the way Fawcett sees the Indians, and what have you researched to build up the portrait of the tribes, the Amazon tribes that you depict in the film?
I didn't quite understand the second part about...
I would like you to tell something about the probable research you did on the Amazon tribes.
Okay. Yeah. Well, the irony is I had been obsessed with a certain degree of accuracy, right? I thought I'm going to go down to Brazil, where he actually was. But as you know, if you're from Brazil, large portions of where Fawcett were, which were deep jungle, are now basically soybean fields for farming. So as much as I would have wanted to shoot where he was, I didn't want the film to look like Nebraska. So there I knew that I was in a little bit of trouble because there's no longer a possibility to be exactly accurate. Given that fact, I was offered many opportunities to make the film in Southeast Asia, Australia, South Africa, places like that. But I was very frightened and didn't want to do that because I knew that getting the indigenous people right, so to speak, would be impossible in that area of those areas of the world. So I said it has to be at least close to Amazonia so we can get the real thing in the film. And one thing that was extremely important to me was to establish an independence of the indigenous population. That, in other words, in the story and in the film, that they didn't rely on Fawcett at all for their own existence and for their own well-being. That it wasn't that, you know, Fawcett went down there and saved them and what a good guy he is. That was not the point of the story at all. So the focus had to be on establishing the fact that they were independent actors. By the way, we used 4 different tribes. They were fantastic actors because they were totally oblivious to the camera in the best way. But directing was impossible because I would tell them to do something, you know, I would ask for something to be done, and then you would have someone translate it into either Spanish or Portuguese, and then the Portuguese or Spanish would be translated into their language, and then, so you would say, can you do me a favor and walk and sit over there? And then by the time it got translated, they were jumping up and down. So I realized that there was going to be this big gap. But then I decided that any attempt I had to tell them what to do was silly anyway. And at a certain point, we just started to roll the camera on what they were doing, and watching a certain level of existence was great anyway. I did do tons of research. I mean, I read everything I could get my hands on. But it's a tricky thing because what you don't want is you're not making an anthropological movie. And I was terrified, of course, of being sort of condescending, like, hey, it's so very interesting to look at those people. I didn't want to do that at all. Like I said, the whole point of the movie to me was that the whole world, the human race, has this terrible urge, need, desire, tendency to rank, to put into categories. So the upper class in England looks down on Fawcett, and Fawcett has this relationship with his wife where her needs, her as a person, are not really listened to or attended to. And then, of course, there's the indigenous people and how the slave owners treated them. So I wanted to point out that the world is built of hierarchies, and that so looking at it that way, I didn't, even though I did all the research, I didn't want it to be like an anthropological movie. You know, there's a beautiful film, Embrace of the Serpent, which was shot in Colombia, which I felt was that approach already. And so it was almost from an indigenous point of view. And I felt like I didn't want the film to, because that's been done already and done well, I didn't want to repeat that. I wanted to do something that wasn't anthropological. So I tried to be accurate, but I wanted them basically to exist in their own space.
Thank you. Mahari?
My name is Mahari, African Refugee News. Thank you. This is a film that I've seen for 3 decades. Beautiful. The spirit of the film and the soul of the music, you know, it's like the actors were really feeling at home, and this is very strange because they come from other countries. How hard was for you to convince the population to come into your project? Because I remember when Sting wanted to go to the rainforest. I remember we were there with him, and there was this chief with this beautiful thing in his mouth. And I said to him, hey, you know, this is a pop song, you know, he's the best in the world at that time, Sting was. And he said, oh, don't worry, when he comes to my university, he will change. And Sting never played rock. If you remember, in the 90s, he started new projects. So how is it with you all? When you came out from this project, how do you feel? Do you have something new in your life, or is it just a film?
Well, the experience was amazing for me. Weirdly, the experience it's sort of like you have to be as honest as possible, and I kept stressing exactly what I was just saying about how it was essential that I would not exploit them in any way and simply attempt to establish them as their own people, and not try to make a distance between the movie and them and say, look at those people. And this was repeated over and over to them. And by the way, many tribes we did not convince. So particularly, by the way, in the Xingu National Forest in Brazil, what you're talking about, where they put the plate in the lips, I did not get them. I wanted them to come to the film, and they would not submit to being on camera. So I failed in that case. But the strategy I used was to try to be as straightforward and as honest as I could about my intentions in the film, and let the chips fall where they may. It's interesting too, because they had no interest in, as you would imagine, in getting paid lots of money, and there was no point in even offering that. So you would offer, like, irrigation or, some kind of help in some way that they would ask, and just to try and be as respectful as humanly possible. Of course, I'm changed by the experience, although I'm changed by the experience of every movie, because every movie is its own creature, and every movie becomes like one of your own children. I mean, not as good. You guys are better, don't worry. But even so, it takes its own life inside of you, and I'm not as qualified to say how it changed me as perhaps my wife or children are, because they might tell you the real skinny.
Thank you. On the right, please.
Hi, Henrik Welling from Deutsche Welle. I have a question for Mr. Pattinson. There's a big buzz in the city about your appearance here, and I was wondering, because it happens to be that there's Valentine's Day today, I was wondering, what does it mean to you, the Valentine's Day, and what's your favorite gift that you've given to the ones you love?
That I've received?
Both, maybe.
I don't think I've ever received a Valentine's gift.
No, that's all going to change today.
Are you talking about my appearance, like specifically my appearance in the city, or my appearance, like I looked strange somehow? I was like, hold on a second.
The girls are excited.
It's great. I mean, I've weirdly been to Berlin, the Berlinale, I think 3 times on Valentine's Day, so I don't know whether that's a planned thing. It makes my Valentine's Day planning very, very easy, because it amounts to 0. I don't know. I can't really remember what the best gift I ever got is. Sorry, it's all secrets, trade secrets.
Okay, we go back talking about the movie now, but the question on the right. Thank you.
Hey, this is Marcel from WDR1 Live. Good to see you. Robert, question for you, referring to another question we heard before. How long would you be able to survive in the jungle? I mean, I would be dead within 10 seconds. How long would it take for you?
Is this for me?
Yeah.
I don't know. I was thinking about another question earlier about how it's changed, how the experience changed, and it kind of just made me think about that as well. I think when we were shooting it, we were so beholden to the elements that the whole time. I mean, it was like it was a completely virgin jungle, so there's just creatures everywhere. Like, me and Charlie were just like hacking our way through like completely ridiculously dangerous jungle where it could be anything at any point. And I think there's a certain element after about a couple of weeks, you just kind of give into it, and you're like, well, if you die, you die, whatever. And there is something kind of nice, and it kind of made me think that maybe I would survive for at least a few seconds. But I don't know, I kind of was going back to a hotel every day. But yeah, it's kind of nice. Once you kind of give into it and just allow yourself to be kind of part of nature, I think it's a very, very nice and sort of peaceful experience.
Thank you. In the middle, please.
Hello. A couple of questions to Mr. James Gray from Portugal. First of all, when we look to the trailer of this film, we expect a big adventure movie. But then when we see it, the scenes of the jungle only occupy about 30-40 minutes of the picture, and the rest of the action is in England. Why did you opt to concentrate the action in England? And the second question is, this is the first movie you make that it isn't shot in New York. Did this affect in any way your artistic vision? Thank you.
Well, respectfully, I have to tell you, you're quite wrong about the timing. About an hour and 10 minutes is Jungle, more than half the movie, which shows what a great impact it had on you. I can't really speak to expectation. It's not my job to fulfill your expectation of what a movie might be. It's my job to communicate my most intimate impressions. So if I made films to satisfy expectation, I would be in real trouble because everybody has different expectations all the time about everything. The only thing I can say about that is there have been other films that are shot in Amazonia. Obviously, Werner Herzog's films are the most famous among them. And I didn't want to repeat the same film, not because I don't love them, they're amazing, obviously, but you don't want to rip off the movie. And my feeling was that that Amazonia, it was important for me to convey the humanity of the indigenous people, but at the same time, I felt that the essence of the story was a person's attempt to escape the punishing effects of the class system. And as a result, I don't want to say it could have been anywhere, because that's not really the point, but the jungle in itself is not the point of the movie. In a sense, I wanted a more epic tapestry about this person, which is why the war was important, that it was this man's life that went through all of these movements and the people that he drew along with him. So, you know, I thought that the film had adventure elements, but as a pure adventure movie, they exist already in very high numbers. And I think that if I had done an adventure treatment, straight-ahead adventure treatment without introspection, then it would have taken on a kind of white man's burden thing. You know, I'm a very big movie fan. I watch an old movie every night. And I'm a huge fan of George Stevens, but it's very difficult to sit through Gunga Din. I mean, I've watched it, and I feel bad-mouthing George Stevens again, but there's an ideological issue there, and you don't want to make like, oh, let's go, those little brown people, let's deal with them. So the first step in avoiding that is to not treat it like we're going to have a grand adventure, and instead treat the more introspective aspects of the story.
I have another question for Charlie and Sienna, because I think the movie is based on this book by David Gran, but I think there are still members alive of the family, of Fawcett's family. So did you, for researching for your role, did you talk to them? Did you try to, or talk to other adventurous family members that could tell you how their parents were?
I unfortunately did not speak to any of Fawcett's living relatives. I had a very short period of time between finishing the film I'd been making prior to this and starting this film, only 10 days, and wanted, you know, to sort of immerse myself in as much reading and intellectual research as I could do. I did have an opportunity to go to the Royal Geographic in London, the Royal Geographical Society, who have a large archive of Fawcett's letters and journals and some of his equipment. So that was a real thrill to be able to go and to read some of the letters between Fawcett and his wife. And but you know, unfortunately, time was very, very scarce. So we just did what we could, and I spent as much time with James as possible, because he had been on this project for a long time and was a wealth of knowledge. So.
By the way, just as a point, there is really only his granddaughter.
I see.
There's no direct, nobody who actually knew him still alive. So there was no resource that he could have tapped like that. So.
I think the book that you're referring to, there's the David Grand book, The Lost City of Zed, and then there's the Brian Fawcett, which was Percy's son, who compiled a bunch of Fawcett's journals into Exploration Fawcett. Obviously, we mined both of those texts to full effect.
You want to add something,
Sienna?
Right, Sienna?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, there's one on the right, please.
It's Chris from Belgium. Mr. Gray, I know that Lawrence of Arabia was quite an inspiration for this film. I just wonder why, in what way was it the character evolution? Personally, there could be also a parallel with Mans of the Moon, with the relationship of Burton and Spieke as enlightened explorers.
You're talking about the Rafelson film specifically, or the story of that?
More the way you look at indigenous people.
Right. That's very difficult for me to comment, especially in relation to that movie. It's been many years. I have seen it. It's been many years since I've seen it, and I don't have enough distance from my own film to really comment about its similarity with the Rafelson picture. Lawrence of Arabia, it's an inspiration, but it's not. At some point, you watch these movies, but then you have to forget them, and the lean pictures are wonderful because they are oftentimes quite introspective. And please don't misunderstand me. I think David Lean is, up there. He's A+. But at the same time, he is beholden to his time period. And when you watch Lawrence, hello, I'm an Arab, I'm Alec Guinness, I'm playing an Arab man. It's a little ridiculous. So, and also the way that he had to deal with the homosexuality in it, it's very stilted and strange and very 1962, or 61, whatever year it is. You learn, you watch it, but then you forget it because it's beholden to its time. I will say that the one thing that did interest me was to approach it in the surface of it in a classical manner. People have said to me, "Oh, you're a classical director," and I don't really feel that that's true. I think the surfaces are classical, but that doesn't mean that's what's going on in the movie. But I had wanted to approach it in a classical way because then it enables you to make a subtext which is about something that you don't really think it is. So maybe that comes across to you. Maybe, I'm better left in my house not doing anything. So I don't know about that, but what I can say is that the lean pictures are helpful in a kind of logistical way, and they are beautiful films, but at a certain point you have to leave them aside because it's not 1962 anymore. In a sense, like a very glib answer, and I don't want it to sound like I'm disrespecting lean, because believe me, I am not. But it's just a fact. It's a fact. It's like John Ford's my favorite director, but you would never treat Native Americans the way he does in his movies,
There was another question on the right, in the front.
My name is Elena Ringa, and I'm from Vienna, Austria, and my question is to Robert Pattinson. I would like to ask you, how do you work on the role? And from your previous roles, what's your favorite one? Which film do you prefer to watch, for example, a few times?
How did I prepare for it? I was attached to this movie for a long time before we even shot it, and saw the script go through lots of different iterations and talked to James tons and tons. Charlie had 10 days and I think I had years, and saw various different versions of the script, and James was always really open to kind of how I saw the character and was kind of just listened to me about it, and also I just saw the development of where he wanted to take it, and it was just a kind of gradual process. So I didn't have to cram anything in. It was just sort of osmosis, and also I've never had a more immersive experience on a movie. I mean, when we were in, especially in the jungle, I mean, it's just happening. So you don't need to think about how to prepare yourself because it's happening to you, and how you'd react is almost how you would react in reality. What's my favorite movie? This is my favorite movie, obviously.
It's a very diplomatic and wonderful last answer, because we have to close it. I'm sorry, we have other dates, but thank you very much, and thank you very much for bringing it here. It was a pleasure. Thank you.